The city woke slowly, the way a rich man wakes, unhurried, certain that the world would wait. Pale stone towers stretched into the grey morning. Copper gutters dripped. Chimney smoke rose in long, undisturbed columns. The main gates opened at the 6th bell. By that time, the broad cobbled avenues of the Velantir quarter were already swept clean. The lamplighter was extinguishing the last of the night flames with his long brass snuffer, and Aradel had already been working for 2 hours. She came in from the alley behind Corvell Street, the way she always did. The front entrance of the Aldenmore house had wide marble steps and an iron-fitted door with a carved hunting stag above it, which the Aldenmores considered very distinguished. That door was not for her. The back way was a narrow gate set into the garden wall, low enough that she had to duck her head each time she passed through. She was tall, orc tall, a full head above most women in this quarter and several of the men, and the gate had been built for human proportions only. She ducked without thinking. She had trained herself out of noticing it long ago, which was not the same as it not happening. These were different things. She had learned to know the difference. She set her bucket down in the outer scullery and filled it from the pump. The water came out cold enough to whiten her fingertips. She pressed her hands flat against the sides of the bucket until the ache leveled off into something workable, flexed them once, then picked up her cloth and began. Her hands were large even for her size, broad across the knuckles, scarred at the base of the thumb from a tannery chain, rough across the palms in a way no amount of tallow salve could fully undo. In the houses of this quarter, those hands were noticed first, then her height. Then the grey-green of her skin, darker along the jaw and brow, with the undertone of slate that deepened in cold weather. Then, often, her tusks, small as orc tusks went, but visible when she spoke, and the children of several households stared at them with the frank animal curiosity of the very young, before they learned to make their staring less obvious. She worked through the lower rooms while the family was still asleep. Entrance hall first, down on her knees, cloth wrung out, the cream and sage tiles requiring long, even strokes. Then the sitting room. Then the long dining room with its 12-seat table and its portrait of the first Lord Aldenmore, painted in oils, looking prosperous and unsympathetic. She rolled the hall runner and beat it in the yard, carrying it under one arm, then spread it back flat and smooth. She blacked the grate in the dining room fireplace and reset the kindling, stacking it carefully in the way that would draw correctly. She was not supposed to light it. That was for the housemaid Petra, whose job began at a more reasonable hour. There was a hierarchy to these things. Aradel occupied its lowest tier, 3 mornings a week at the Aldenmores, 2 at the Fenwick House, 2 streets over. Saturdays, laundry, heavy loads carted across half the city and returned pressed and folded the following morning. She was not employed by any of these households. She was day hire, one of several orc women who circulated through the Velantir quarter doing what the permanent staff considered too heavy or too cold or too hard on the knees. Orc women were given the worst floors, the frozen pumps, the loads that left marks on the shoulders. The pay reflected a supply the market assumed would always be cheap. She did not argue with the pay. She took it and walked home and counted it and added it to the pouch sewn into the lining of her coat, and kept going. The morning moved in layers of task and silence. Mrs. Aldenmore's bell rang at 7:30. The lighter step of the housemaid went up the stairs. Water was carried. Voices filtered through ceilings. Aradel was in the hallway rolling out her mop when the daughter of the house, a girl of about 13 named Ossia, came down the stairs and stopped at the bottom. Aradel straightened, slowly, deliberately. She had learned this particular care years ago. She did not loom in doorways. She did not let her shadow fall across people without warning. She came into rooms at an angle, kept to one side of corridors, set heavy things down quietly so the thud of them would not startle. Orc women who moved suddenly made people flinch. People who flinched became problems. She moved carefully, always. Ossia stared. Her gaze went briefly and directly to Aradel's tusks, the way children's eyes went to anything that didn't fit the expected shape of a face. Then she stepped around the wet part of the floor without looking at it and went through to the kitchen. She did not say good morning. She was 13, and she had learned this from watching the adults around her. Aradel went back to mopping. She found the cup an hour later when she carried the breakfast things back to the kitchen. The good cups were stacked by the window, cream pottery, thin blue band bought in matching sets. On the lower shelf sat a different cup, tin, dented. The handle resoldered, the dark mark of it still showing. She had not put it there. Someone else had, which meant it was for her. She had seen its like in other houses. In one of them, the cook had given her a small pointed smile when she set it out, as though they were sharing a joke. Aradel had not returned the smile. The understanding was not spoken. It did not need to be. She washed the good cups. She left the tin one where it was. When she was thirsty, she drank water from the pump. By 9 o'clock, the family had assembled in the breakfast room. She was cleaning the door frame nearby, close enough to hear everything through the gap left by a door that was never quite fully closed. It took her all morning just to do the sitting room floor. Mrs. Aldenmore was saying, "I don't know what she does with the time." "She was here at 6, Petra said. "Well, she was supposed to be. That's not the same as working." The sound of a cup being set down. "They're strong enough," said Mr. Aldenmore, in the vague tone of a man reading something and wanting to be done with a conversation. "You can give her the heavy work. That's the point." "I do. I'm simply saying the carpets should be done by now." The Pellin woman was slower, reliable. A pause. "I don't like having them here when Ossia is home from her lessons. You know how she stares." A silence of the kind that meant neither person found this a difficult problem. Aradel finished the door frame. She moved her cloth along the window casings in steady strokes. She had heard variations of this conversation in 7 different houses. The Pellin woman, the girl from south of the river, the big orc they used before, the reliable one before that. You became a type, and the type was measured against itself across time, and the standards shifted depending on whether the present instance was being assessed against an absent predecessor or a hypothetical future replacement. She stored the anger somewhere deep, where it would keep without poisoning anything. At 10:30, she went upstairs to the library. The Aldenmore Library was at the end of a corridor lined with small landscape paintings that no one looked at. The room held perhaps 200 books on floor-to-ceiling mahogany shelves, a desk near the window, 2 armchairs by the fireplace, a low table between them. It smelled of paper and beeswax and the particular dryness of a room that was used but not much loved. Cleanliness in rooms no one cared about was its own kind of performance, and Aradel understood it well. Sitting at the desk was the household archivist. His name was Adrian Vale. He had been cataloguing the Aldenmore collection for 3 years. He was perhaps 30, with ink-stained fingers and the slightly forward stoop of a man who spent his working life bent over a desk. When Aradel had come to clean this room for the first time 7 months ago, he had been standing at the window, and she had braced herself for the usual performance of a person making way, the pointed step back, the small theatrical clearing of space that said, "I am allowing you passage." And instead he had simply turned and said quietly, "Good morning." She had stopped walking. He had said it the way you said it to anyone. No careful loudness, no warmth of the overbright kind that said, "I'm making a point of this, note it and feel grateful." He had also said her name, her full name, the one she'd given Petra on her first morning. And he had said it correctly, which was not a given with Orc names in this quarter. Most people shortened them or shifted them into something easier to hold in a human mouth, because the original was considered inconvenient. She had said good morning back. He had returned to his desk. She had cleaned the room and left. In the 7 months since, they had exchanged perhaps 40 or 50 words. He moved when she needed the shelf behind him. She asked whether to shift the low table. Sometimes he said thank you when she finished a room, not in the way that meant it was remarkable she had done her job, but simply in the way that meant the room was in better order and he had noticed. She had spent a long time waiting for it to become something else. It did not. She watched him the way she watched everyone in houses she worked in, for danger. She tracked who lost their tempers. She tracked where the expensive objects sat, so that when something went missing, and something always went missing eventually, she could account for her own proximity before anyone had to ask. She had learned to feel the pressure of suspicion forming before it was spoken. In this house, in this city, with this body, that was not optional knowledge. It was survival. She watched Adrian Vale and found nothing dangerous. He lost his temper by pressing his hands flat on the desk for a moment when a binding split, then continuing. He did not drink at work. He ate simply, bread and something from a cloth parcel, at the desk without ceremony. He wore the same 2 coats in rotation, both old. She recognized the particular quality of a person performing composure in a register slightly above the one they had grown up in. She had spent years watching old money and new money and the difference between them. He was neither. He was, like her, working in a house that did not quite belong to him. She noticed other things, the small, patient things that accumulated when you paid close attention to someone over weeks and months. He was careful with the books in a way that went beyond the requirements of his job. She had seen him set a volume down on the desk and then almost immediately pick it up again and set it more gently, as though he had caught himself being careless. He kept the desk in a particular order that she had learned to work around exactly, leaving nothing moved more than necessary, returning things to their positions after she cleaned. She appreciated this more than she would have said aloud. She appreciated that he did not leave his work in a state that made her job harder, and then register surprise when she was still working when he returned. He was not without his own awkwardness. Some mornings he was absorbed so completely in whatever he was copying that he did not hear her come in, and when she reached past him for a shelf, he would startle slightly, then immediately look embarrassed about having startled. He had a habit of starting to say something and then stopping, especially in the early weeks, as though he had thought of something worth saying and then decided it was not his place. She had noticed this too. She had not done anything about it yet, but she had noticed. The difference between them was that he used the front door. One Tuesday in early November, she arrived to find the scullery door frozen in its frame. She spent several minutes working the handle before it gave. By the time she got inside, her fingers had gone white at the tips. She stood at the pump, pressing her palms around the iron handle, waiting for feeling to return, when a cup was set on the ledge beside her. She turned. Adrian stood there, a second cup in his own hand. "I made too much," he said, and turned back toward the corridor. She looked at the cup he had left, one of the good cups, cream pottery, thin blue band. She looked at his retreating back. She looked at the cup again. Her hands were still half numb. The steam rose from the rim in thin curls. She thought, what does he want? Not as an accusation, as a methodical question, because in her experience a thing given freely had a price that would be named later, or a price that would never be named, which was worse. She looked for the price. She could not find it. She picked up the cup. The tea was plain, no milk, almost too hot. She held it against the front of her coat for a moment, both hands around the pottery, and the warmth went through immediately. She stood in the cold scullery with the steam at her face and felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude exactly. Something less comfortable than gratitude. Something that felt like a warning she could not yet name. She drank the tea, washed the cup, left it on the ledge. She went upstairs. She did not think about it for the rest of the morning. 3 days later, she came in for the breakfast things and glanced at the lower kitchen shelf. The tin cup was gone. She checked the shelf twice. She checked the shelf below. She looked along the back wall. It had not fallen. It had been removed. She did not know by whom. She did not ask. She went back to work and thought about the absence the same careful way she thought about everything, without conclusions she could not yet support. The following Tuesday, the tea was on the ledge when she arrived. The good cup, steam rising. It was there the Tuesday after that. She stopped looking for the angle. She let it be what it appeared to be, a small, repeated act of decency. She did not decide what that meant. She went to work. But she noticed things. She noticed that he had, at some point between her Tuesday visits, moved the step-ladder from the far corner of the library to the near wall closer to the shelves she always worked first. He had not mentioned this. She had not mentioned it. She had simply taken the ladder and used it and put it back where he had left it, which was more convenient than where it had been. She noticed that when she was working on the lower shelves nearest his desk, he would shift his chair slightly to give her more room. Not with ceremony, not with the pointed look of someone expecting to be thanked, just a quiet, lateral adjustment that she would have missed if she had not been paying attention. She was always paying attention. The cold sharpened through November. Some mornings the alley behind Corvell Street was sheeted with ice, and she came earlier to give herself time on the back steps. She moved with both hands free, bucket balanced against her hip, placing her feet carefully along the center of the stones where the ice was thinner. On the frozen mornings, she was always careful going through the low garden gate. Not just for the ducking, but because ice at the threshold was invisible and her balance was precious. A fall meant days she could not afford. Her knuckles had been cracking in the cold. She rubbed tallow salve into them at night before she slept, working the grease into the deep cracks with the pad of her thumb, a habit an older orc woman at the tannery had shown her years ago. It helped some. Her hands were always going to be her hands. Every coin she saved beyond rent and food went into the cloth pouch sewn into the lining of her coat. She had been saving for 4 years. She did not use a bank. The clerks behind the counters had a way of looking at her that she found it more productive not to endure, and the questions they asked orc women were not the questions they asked anyone else. She kept her money herself, in the pouch, and at night she sat at the small table by the window of her rented room and counted, and the numbers moved very slowly in the right direction. Her mother's house was in the Tallow district, south of the river, left to both sisters in the will, but a creditor had contested the estate, claiming a debt Aradel had never been able to fully verify and could not afford to challenge in court. The sum was large. The document had a quality she could feel but not articulate. Something in the paper, the signature, the confidence of a claim made against a dead woman by someone who understood that dead women were not positioned to object. She had shown it once to a man who read such things for a fee. He had said carefully that it appeared legitimate. She'd understood from the way he said it that he was not entirely sure and would not be spending more time on the matter. The house had not been seized, but it sat with the debt around it, encumbered. Her sister Biri was 17, old enough to work, but not yet earning steadily. Aradel paid the holding agent in installments, a slow, grinding process that consumed most of what she saved. She did not buy new clothes. She did not go to the baths or the theater. She bought bread, dried beans, the cheapest cuts of meat. She walked everywhere. She kept the coat, and she counted. The problem for 4 years had been that she had nothing concrete to push against. She knew something was wrong with the creditor's claim. She could feel it the way she felt a loose flagstone, a wrongness in how the weight distributed. But she did not have access to the original title records, did not know where they were held or which ones would be relevant, could not afford months of legal research, and had no way to find the right questions, because the knowledge of what questions to ask also lived inside a world she had never been permitted to enter. She was outside all of it. What she had not had for 4 years was a door. She found the land law book herself. It was a Thursday morning in mid-November. She was on the small step ladder in the library corner, working the upper shelves, when a cloth snagged on a spine. She grabbed the volume before it could fall. She steadied it, pushed it back, and then looked at it the way you looked at something your hands had already touched. Practical Principles of Land Law and Property. Encumbrance, 16th edition. She read the title twice, then a third time. Then she checked the time by the church tower through the window, calculated she had perhaps 20 minutes before she needed to move on, and opened the book standing on the ladder. The table of contents told her in 4 minutes that the chapter on posthumous debt claims existed. The chapter itself was dense, written in compressed legal prose that assumed a specialist reader. She worked through it word by word, slowly, her large thumb moving along the lines. But the clause was there. Section 12, subsection 4. The standard of evidence required when a creditor claimed debt against a deceased person's estate with no surviving spouse. What the evidence needed to demonstrate. What it needed to predate. She stayed on the ladder for 11 minutes. Then she climbed down, replaced the book exactly where it had been, and finished the upper shelving in silence. At the end of the morning, she stopped at the library door and turned. Adrian was still at his desk, his pen moving in the ledger. "The land law book," she said. "The one on the upper left shelf. Is it available for general use?" He set his pen down. He thought about the question. She noticed the pause, the slight deliberateness of it. General use for anyone in the household, technically. That would include day hire. A pause. "I know," she said. She'd already read it. "I just wanted to be certain." She went out. Behind her, she heard the brief silence before he returned to his work. She walked home in the cold with her hand in her pocket and the notebook against her palm, and she let herself think about the clause all the way to her door. She came back to the book 4 more times over the following weeks, always during the quieter hours, sitting in one of the armchairs by the cold fireplace with a heavy volume open across her knees. Legal language required a different kind of attention than ordinary text. slower, more literal, each phrase checked against the one before it. She worked through it with her finger on the page, her lips sometimes moving slightly. She found what she had hoped to find. The clause specifying that a creditor's original claim had to predate the title record's encumbrance notation by no more than 30 days. She copied the section number and the exact language into her notebook, in the small, careful handwriting she used for accounts. Closed the book, replaced it, put the notebook in her coat, walked home, read what she had written 3 times over her evening bread. She needed to see the original title record for her mother's house. If the dates did not agree, if the order was wrong, then the clause meant something, but she did not know where the original title record was held. Public records had been consolidated 15 years ago, but private pre-consolidation records were a different matter, and she did not know who held what or how to find out. She thought about it on and off for a week. Then, on a Thursday morning, she was working the lower shelves nearest the desk when she paused. She had noticed them before, but not looked closely. Thick institutional volumes on the bottom 2 shelves, their spines marked with year ranges in Adrian's careful hand. Not books, ledgers. She straightened slowly. She ran her fingertip along one spine, feeling the raised lettering. Then she stood and said, without quite intending to start a conversation, "What are these ledgers?" Adrian looked up from his work. "Property and title records," he said. "Copies. The first Lord Aldenmore was a title registrar before the public consolidation. He kept working copies of everything he processed." A pause. "Most of the major title records for this quarter, going back 50 years. Aradel looked at the bottom shelves. Something settled in her chest, careful and precise, like the mechanism of a lock. "Do people use them?" she said. "Occasionally. Solicitors mostly. Anyone in the household can access them." He looked at her. "I maintain the index." She nodded. She went back to the shelves, ran her cloth along the next section, and said nothing else. She needed to think about how to ask the right questions and to be certain she was asking for the right reasons, and not just for the reason of hope, which she did not trust. That evening at her small table, she opened her notebook, found the section number, and wrote below it, "Aldenmore Archive. Pre-consolidation title records. Ask to see index." She underlined it once. Then she went to bed. She waited 2 more weeks. Not because she was afraid, but because she moved carefully always, and this mattered more than most things she had ever needed to do carefully. On a Thursday in the first week of December, she worked in the library for an hour in silence, and at the end of that hour, she set down her cloth and said, "I'd like to use the archive. I want to look at a title record for a property in the Tallow district, and I want to understand how to check whether an encumbrance notation was added after the original filing date or alongside it." He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man who has understood the shape of something without being told its contents, and who is deciding whether to ask. He did not ask. He stood, went to the bottom shelves, and pulled out the index volume. He opened it on the desk and turned it to face her. "Original filings are in this column," he said, touching the page. "Any subsequent notations are in the adjacent column with a secondary date. If the dates match, the notation was added at the time of filing. If there's a gap." He touched the second column. "There's a gap. That's all I need," she said. He moved his chair back to give her room. She sat at the desk. She turned pages carefully, her broad fingers moving along the columns, cracking district by district, year by year, street by street. 40 minutes. The index was thorough. She found it, The encumbrance notation on her mother's house had been added 8 months after the original filing date. The creditor's claim was dated 3 months before the original filing. By the terms of the clause she had copied, the claim should have appeared alongside the filing, not 8 months after it. 8 months was not a clerical error. It was not a delay. It was not something that could be explained away. She wrote down the record numbers, the dates, the column references. Every figure twice. She closed the index. She stood up. Her hands were steady. She pressed her notebook flat against her chest for a moment, feeling the hard cover through her coat, and then folded it away. Adrian was at the window. He had moved there while she worked. She had noticed it without registering it, and she understood it now as something he did when he needed to give another person room to think. He was looking at the street below with his hands in his pockets, and there was something slightly careful in the way he was holding himself, the particular stillness of a person who is deliberately not watching. "Did you find what you needed?" he said. Yes. He nodded once. He did not ask what she intended to do with it, and she did not tell him. She put on her coat, picked up her bucket, and went to finish the morning's rooms, and the rest of the morning had the quality of a thing she was moving through on the far side of something important. 3 days later, she went to a legal advocate's office in the Southern Market, above a printer's shop. The woman who saw her had careful eyes and ink on her cuffs, and saw clients at modest fees, which was the only kind of advocate Aradel could afford. She laid her papers on the desk, the notebook, the copied clause, the record numbers, the dates, and watched the advocate read. "Where did you access these records?" the advocate asked. "A private collection with general use access. The archivist verified my right." The advocate looked at her for a moment with the particular assessment of someone deciding whether to proceed with an unusual case. Aradel held her gaze and kept her hands still on the table and said nothing. "The timing discrepancy you've identified is real," the advocate said. "I can't tell you yet whether it will be actionable, but the discrepancy is real and it is significant." A pause. "This kind of case has been won before, not often, but not never." Aradel walked home through the grey afternoon with her papers in her coat. She let herself, for approximately 10 minutes, feel the specific weight of hope that was not irrational. Her shoulders were set differently than they had been on the walk to the office. She noticed this only because she was in the habit of noticing her own body, its position, how much space it was claiming. She let her shoulders stay where they were. Then she walked the rest of the way in her ordinary manner, head up, shoulders at their full width, the way she allowed herself to walk in empty streets. December came with its solstice obligations, and the Aldenmore house prepared for a season of dinner parties. Everything had to be exceptional. Every floor, every cloth, every piece of silver had to be beyond reproach, because guests in this quarter used the condition of a house to measure the standing of everyone inside it. Aradel took every additional morning they offered. 3 extra at the Aldenmores. More pressing work from the Fenwick household. A one-time job on Renwick Street for a family whose regular cleaner was ill. She came home on those evenings so tired that she sat on the edge of her bed in her coat for several minutes before she could stand to take it off. She ate bread standing at the sink. She counted coins by lamplight, moving them into the pouch carefully, noting each addition in the small margin of her account page. She slept and woke before dawn, and did it again. She was wearing her boots out faster than she had anticipated. She turned them over one evening and looked at the sole of the right one, the heel worn thinner than it should be for boots this age. She would need to have them resoled. Not yet. She could take them further. But she made a note of it in the margin of the account page. Because shoes were the kind of thing you needed to plan for, because shoes were how everything else worked. She wrote to her sister Biri in the first week of December. She kept it factual, as she always did. No promises. But she wrote, "I've found something. I'm working on it. Nothing is certain yet, but something is more certain than it was." She folded the letter, sealed it, addressed it in her careful hand, and set it by the door. She sat at the table for a while after that. The room was quiet. The lamp was low. She opened her notebook and looked at the dates she had written, the original filing, the encumbrance notation, the gap of 8 months between them, and she felt the possibility of the thing the way you felt a door when your hand was already on the handle. The crisis came on a Friday in the second week of January. The Alden Moores had been hosting evening gatherings for the solstice season, and in preparation for one of these, Mrs. Alden Moore had brought out a lacquered box from the upper cabinet of the drawing room. Among its contents was a small enameled brooch in the shape of a wren, old, valuable, belonging to the first Mrs. Alden Moore. The current one considered it a symbol of her legitimate place in the family's history. She had set it on the drawing room mantelpiece for display. The gathering was held. The guests were seen out. The following morning, the brooch was not on the mantelpiece. Aradel sensed it before anyone told her. The household had a particular texture when something was wrong. Not silence, but a held breath quality to every room. Petra's face in the corridor was performing neutrality. The kitchen girl did not look up when Aradel came in for the bucket. These were signals she had learned to read with a precision that she would not have needed if she had been a different kind of person working in a different kind of house. She was in the back hallway, rolling out fresh linen for the corridor press, when Mrs. Alden Moore appeared at the top of the stairs and stood there. She did not come down. "The drawing room brooch is missing," she said. Aradel straightened, slowly, as she always straightened in moments like this. No sudden movement. No shifting of her considerable weight in a way that could be read wrong. She kept her face still. She kept her tusks covered by keeping her jaw settled. She was aware of her own height in the corridor, the width of her shoulders, the green-gray of her skin that she had watched people's eyes catalogue 1,000 times as they sorted her into what they already knew. An orc woman. Present. Convenient. "I see," she said. "You were in the drawing room yesterday morning." "I cleaned it in the morning, before the gathering. The brooch was on the mantelpiece when I set it out at noon. The cleaning was done before noon." "Yes." Mrs. Alden Moore's face had the quality of a face that has already reached its conclusion and is now performing the formality of the conversation. It was not cruelty, exactly. It was something worse than cruelty, because cruelty implied a choice. This was simply the operation of a certainty so settled it had stopped needing evidence. An orc woman had been present. A valuable thing was gone. The two facts had a familiar gravitational relationship. That was all. "I didn't take it," Aradel said. Flat, without pleading. "I'd like you to leave your work here. You'll be paid for this morning." "I'd like to know what evidence. Please don't make this difficult." The sentence landed exactly as it was designed to land. Aradel looked at Mrs. Alden Moore from the bottom of the staircase, a long, steady look, and then she began, with steady hands, to fold the linen she had been laying out. There was no reason to leave it in disorder. A door opened. Adrian came out of the library. He stood in the corridor and looked up at Mrs. Alden Moore. His hands were at his sides, very still. "Where was the brooch set out?" he asked. Mrs. Alden Moore looked at him with cool surprise. Mr. Vale, this doesn't concern the archive. I'd like to understand. Was it the east end of the mantelpiece or the west? A pause. I don't see what the placement has to do with the east end has a crack in the marble backing, he said. I noticed it in the autumn when I was retrieving documents from the drawing room cabinet. It runs under the decorative molding. You can't see it without looking closely. The corridor was quiet. The brooch is enamel, he said. Heavy for its size, if it was near the right side and the fire went cold overnight. He did not finish the sentence. He said it simply, in the same even tone he used for everything. I think it may have slid. I'd looked behind the great guard. Mrs. Alden Moore's face underwent a particular adjustment. The displeasure of a person who has proceeded with a certainty and is now being asked to reconsider it in front of other people, which was a different matter entirely from reconsidering it privately. I was through the drawing room this morning, she said, cooler now. I would have noticed. The gap between the guard and the wall is quite narrow, he said. And dark. He paused. It would be worth checking before any other decisions are made. This was the most direct thing Aradel had ever heard him say. She stood in the corridor holding her folded linen and watched him say it. Watched his hands stay still. Watched him look up at Mrs. Alden Moore without aggression and without retreat. Just steady. Just present. Just there. Mrs. Alden Moore came down the stairs and went into the drawing room. Silence, the iron clang of the great guard being shifted. A longer silence than Aradel expected. Then Mrs. Alden Moore's voice through the doorway, controlled and edged. I don't see it. Aradel did not move. Adrian said quietly, it would have rolled to the far side of the guard. The slope of the marble runs that way. Another scrape of metal. A pause. Then, from the drawing room, it has fallen into the gap. A silence that lasted longer than the announcement required. It appears you are right. She came back into the corridor. She had the brooch in her hand, a smear of soot on her cuff from reaching behind the grate. She looked at Aradel. It seems it did fall, she said, in the tone of a person who has said what can be said and will not say more. Then she went upstairs. The corridor was quiet. Aradel stood with the folded linen and turned to look at Adrian and found that she did not know what to do with her face. She had a face that was difficult to read at the best of times. The grey-green skin, the strong jaw, the slight forward set of the brow that people often took for severity when she was feeling nothing of the kind. But the difficulty now was not about management. It was about the fact that she had prepared, with great care and over a very long time, for this moment to go differently. She had prepared for him to stay in the library. He had not stayed in the library. He looked, if she was honest, like a man who had done something that cost him something and had not yet fully accounted for the expense. Not proud of it, not waiting to be thanked. There was something slightly uncertain in the way he was standing, the particular look of a person recalibrating what they had just done and finding the calculation was not yet finished. "Thank you," she said. The words came out with more effort than usual, not because she was not grateful, but because something else was also present, something that did not have a clean name. "The crack is real," he said. "I noticed it in the autumn." "I know." He nodded once and went back into the library. She heard him sit down, the small shift of the chair, and then, after a pause, the sound of his pen resuming its work. She finished the corridor. She finished the linen press. She went to the drawing room and swept the hearth and reset the grate, and she paused briefly at the marble backing of the east mantelpiece and ran her fingertip along the molding until she found it, the hairline crack thin and dark, invisible unless you were looking for it. She had been looking. It was exactly where he had said it would be. What followed was not dramatic. That was the thing about real costs. They never were. Mrs. Aldenmore did not fire her. Aradel had expected she wouldn't, not mid-season. But when Petra brought the payment envelope at the end of the following week, she said, in her low, practical way, "She's asked me to find another day hire for the heavy laundry days." Aradel put the envelope in her pocket. "When?" "After the season ends." She noted this. She kept working, but she also noticed in those same weeks that something else had changed. Adrian came down to the scullery one morning. He was never in the scullery, and asked in a carefully practical manner whether she knew that the elderly collector in the East Quarter, a man named Carveth who maintained a private archive, was looking for someone to transcribe documents. Copying work, he said, modest but reliable pay. Carveth was, in his words, indifferent to most things that other people cared about. "How do you know him?" she asked. "He brought a manuscript here once. We corresponded for a while." A pause. "He's not easy company, but he's reliable about payment." She thought about it for 2 days. Then she wrote to Carveth. He wrote back with terms that were modest but real. She accepted. She added it to her Saturdays, which were already heavy, but she had carried heavier. The work at Carveth's was different from the Aldenmore house. His rooms were cluttered and dim, the man himself taciturn to the point of near silence, and he treated her the way he seemed to treat most things in his life, with a kind of brisk indifference that was almost restful. He handed her the documents, told her where to start, and left her to it. He did not watch her work. He did not check whether she was moving quickly enough. When she finished a session, he paid her from a small cash box without ceremony, counting the coins into her open palm with the same precision she used when she was counting them herself. It was not pleasant work exactly, but it was clean, and it was hers in a way that most of her work was not. She did not thank Adrian directly. But on a Tuesday morning in early February, she brought something other than her bucket and cloths into the library for the first time. A cup, her own plain grey pottery from the market, nothing special. She set it on the low table near the armchairs, filled it from the pot Adrian had already made, and poured his cup too without asking, and set it at the edge of his desk within reach. He looked at the cup. He looked at her. He picked it up. They said nothing. It became a fact of Tuesday mornings. The cup was hers. The tea was shared. She decided, methodically and with full awareness, to do one thing for herself that was not about utility. That was enough. She started, cautiously, to talk to him. One Tuesday, she noticed a slim book on his desk, worn cloth cover, not from the Aldenmore collection, which meant he had brought it himself. She said, without quite planning to, "What is that?" He told her. A collection of letters from a historical archivist who had spent 30 years cataloguing an estate library much like this one. Tedious, he said. Obsessive. He found it very companionable. He said this with a dry irony that caught her off guard, and she looked at him for a moment, directly, without calculating anything, simply because she was choosing to. "That's an unusual thing to want from a book," she said. "I'm usually very alone in rooms," he said. She thought about that for the rest of the morning, turning it over on the walk home the way she turned over things she was still working out the shape of. Another week, she asked about a binding coming loose on the lower shelf. She had meant to mention it briefly, but the question opened into a longer conversation about how old books wore out, how you knew the difference between a binding that could be saved and one that was past it. He opened the volume flat on the desk between them and ran his finger along the spine to show where the glue had failed. She listened with the full attention she gave to anything she was genuinely learning. At some point, she realized she had set down her cloth and was standing at the desk with her arms at her sides, simply present. She had stopped working without noticing she had stopped. She picked up her cloth and went back to the shelves. She thought about the conversation for most of the walk home and most of the evening after. There were other things too, smaller than conversations. On a morning when the cold had been particularly bad and she had come in with her hands not yet fully warmed, she had reached for a high shelf and her fingers had not gripped cleanly and a thin folio had slid. She'd caught it, but barely, and she had stood on the ladder for a moment with the folio pressed flat between her palms, steadying herself. When she came down, she found that he had moved the ink well on his desk slightly further back from the edge. Not his usual position, just a quiet rearrangement of the things nearest her reach. He had not looked up. She had set the folio back on the shelf and gone on with the shelves and said nothing. But she had noted it with the same careful attention she brought to all things that changed. One Thursday morning in March, she came into the library to find the fire already lit. She had not lit it. Petra had not come this early. She stood in the doorway for a moment, feeling the warmth already settled in the room, the smell of wood smoke still fresh. She hung up her coat and started on the shelves and said nothing about it. He said nothing about it. The room was warm, that was all. And one morning, a later morning, a lighter one, the windows already showing a pale wash of early spring, she noticed in passing that Adrian had moved the small step ladder from its usual corner and left it propped near the shelves she always worked first. Not in her way, just near, as though he had thought about her route through the room. He was at his desk when she came in, already at work. He did not say anything about the ladder. She did not say anything about the ladder. She took it to the upper shelves and did her work. She was on the step ladder near the window, working the upper section, when she paused. She had been carrying a question for several days. Not a dangerous one, not anything she couldn't withdraw from if she had misjudged the moment. She had held it the way she held plans, until she was certain she wanted to say it. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she said. He looked up from his desk. "This house," she said. "This kind of work." He was quiet for a moment. He turned his pen over in his hand. Then, "Yes, I think about it." "What would you do?" "I'd want to work on something that needed finding," he said. "Not maintaining what's already catalogued. Finding what isn't. Old records, misfiled things. The kind of work that's mostly in buildings that smell of damp and cost more than they pay." He said this with his usual dry irony, but underneath it there was something genuine, something he did not usually let reach his voice. She climbed down from the ladder. "That sounds like work you could actually do," she said, "if you had the right connections." "Yes," he said. "If." She crossed to the next shelf and began working it. "The collector in the East Quarter," she said. "Carveth. He mentioned to me that he knows people with larger private collections. Library? Family archives? People who need someone with proper knowledge rather than just a pair of hands." She paused. "I told him I knew someone." Adrian looked at her. "I don't know if it amounts to anything," she said, "but you could write to him." She shrugged, a gesture that came naturally to her Orsish shoulders, broader than she had intended. "He responds to letters." She went back to the shelves. Behind her, she heard him set down his pen and then, after a pause, pick it up again. She did not look back. She had said what she had come to say. It was enough to have said it. The legal advocate sent a second letter in the middle of March. The creditor's agent had responded. The defense of the original claim was not, the advocate said, as solid as the agent believed. There would be a hearing 3 or 4 months away. The house was not going anywhere. She wrote to Biri, not with promises, with facts. The facts were better than they had been 6 months ago. She wrote, "The case is moving. I will send more when I know more. Keep the receipts for everything." She folded the letter, sealed it, set it by the door. Then she sat at the table by the window with her hands in her lap. The lamp was lit. The room was quiet. She looked at her hands, large, rough, cracked at the knuckles, tallow darkened at the palms. The hands of someone who had spent years doing work that cost the body something. She looked at them without judgment. She thought about the cup on the ledge, the fire already lit. The step ladder moved to where she needed it. The careful way a person could make room without making a performance of making room. She thought about the fact that she had, this morning, poured his tea first, that she had asked him a question she didn't need answered for any practical reason, that she had given his name to Carveth without being asked to. These were small things in the world's accounting. In hers, they were considerable. She got up, made tea, stood at the window of her small room looking out at the street. The evening was mild, the first genuinely mild evening of the year, and somewhere down the block someone was playing a fiddle, badly but with real enthusiasm. She listened. After a moment, she recognized the tune. An old melody from the southern districts, the kind of thing her mother had sometimes hummed while working in the house in the tallow district. The house that was still there, still waiting. She had spent years managing herself for other people's comfort, keeping her voice low, her movements careful, her body made smaller than it was, the tusks covered when she was uncertain, the height compressed in doorways, the strength disguised as mere usefulness. Folding herself into the shapes that human spaces required, because human spaces had not been built for her. She was tired of the folding. She finished her tea, set down the cup, her cup, the plain grey pottery one. The tin one with the resoldered handle had not been put out for her in 3 months. She had not once looked for it. She noticed this now, thinking about cups, and found she had nothing in particular to feel about it except a quiet, factual acknowledgement that something had changed. She went to bed. She woke before dawn, laced her boots, put on her coat, and felt the familiar weight of the money pouch in the lining. Lighter than it had been a year ago, the balance tipping slowly in the right direction. She went out into the early morning air, and down the stairs and into the street. The city was grey and quiet, and wet with dew. She walked through it with her head up, her shoulders at their full natural width, her body moving the way it was built to move. Not minimized, not apologetic. Simply her own. The cobblestones were cold under her boots. Ahead, the lamplighter was doing his rounds, the long brass snuffer swinging at his side. She turned onto Corvell Street. She walked to the alley behind the Aldenmore house. She ducked through the low garden door because it was still low, and she was still tall, and the world did not change its shape in a season. She came into the scullery. The tea was on the ledge, as it was every Tuesday. Beside it, already positioned near the pump where she left her things before going upstairs, was the step ladder from the library corner, brought down the previous evening or early this morning before she arrived. It was a small and entirely practical thing. It saved her perhaps 2 minutes of a morning that did not need saving. On the ledge beside the tea, set slightly apart, was a second note. Not a letter, just a folded slip of paper with her name on the outside in his careful archivist's hand. She picked it up. Inside, in the same hand. Carveth wrote back. He knows someone in the Eastern Holdings. I thought you should know first. Nothing more. She read it twice, the paper small in her broad fingers. Then she folded it and put it in her coat pocket against the pouch. She stood and looked at the tea and the step ladder and the note for a moment. 3 small things, set out without ceremony on a cold Tuesday morning, none of them dramatic, all of them real. Then she picked up the tea, drank it standing at the pump, set the cup back on the ledge, and went to work. It was a Tuesday.